Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rank and File Sports. Today we're going to be previewing the Georgia Bulldogs 2024 college football schedule. Georgia has a total of 7 home games and 4 away games, along with a quote-unquote neutral site game against Clemson, even though that's being played in Atlanta. So technically that is like an 8th home game for them. They have a total of 5 top 25 opponents, according to our preseason top 25, which we released recently, and an overall schedule difficulty of 7.5 out of 10.
For the guaranteed wins column, we have Tennessee Tech to start us off. No surprises there. They're just a tune-up game for the Dogs after they face Clemson in Week 1. Then we have Kentucky, led by NC State transfer quarterback Devin Leary. Kentucky's a wild card this year. No one really knows what we're going to be getting with them. But Georgia's just too much of a machine to even consider the possibility of them losing this game. Auburn and Mississippi State are rebuilding, so these games should be easy wins for Georgia. And UMass is a tune-up before Georgia Tech, which we also have as a guaranteed win simply because the game is in Athens. If the game were in Atlanta instead, Georgia would still probably win by multiple possessions, but you really never know in rivalry week if the underdog has home field advantage. But Georgia's just too much of a machine for any of these opponents to keep games competitive for longer than a half. For the likely wins, we feel that Clemson is going to be a highly watched and paid attention to game at the start of this year. But Clemson just isn't the Clemson it once was. Georgia is in the midst of a historic run of dominance. So I don't think Georgia shows much mercy in this one, and I don't think this game is going to be particularly close after a half, but it's hard to count out Dabo Swinney, especially in week 1 when you don't really know what the look of all these teams are going to be just yet. So that's why we can't put it in the guaranteed column. We think Alabama is a likely win instead of a toss-up simply because they play each other relatively early in the season, and Coach Caleb DeBoer will still be working things out with his quarterback Jalen Milroe, while the Dogs will already be a very well-established machine by this point with the experience they're bringing back on both sides of the ball. With Florida, the hatred these two schools have for each other can't be overlooked, which always leaves the potential for an upset, but Florida just isn't very good. And by this point in the season, that will be clear to pretty much all of us. Ole Miss just doesn't have the physicality to match up with Georgia, even though the game will be in Oxford. And great coaches like Kirby are awesome at exploiting the weaknesses in his opponent. And Tennessee just isn't the same as they were in 2022. So they couldn't even be competitive against Georgia then. So it's hard to imagine that Tennessee has much of a chance of pulling off the upset this year. The Texas game is a big toss-up here. Both teams are ultra talented and both teams have national championship aspirations, and the game is in Austin. Texas isn't used to playing lots of great teams every year. No disrespect to the Big 12, but the SEC is just a different animal. So while this could be a point of concern for Texas that a lot of Georgia fans may be trying to use to justify the fact that they believe Georgia will win the game, the flip side of that is that this could also mean that the crowd will be ready to go for this one. Georgia will probably be number 1 or number 2 in the polls when this game happens, so it's very possible, if not probable, that College Game Day will be in Austin for this one. And when teams are this evenly matched, anything can happen. You have 2 Heisman hopefuls in Carson Beck for Georgia and Quinn Ewers for Texas, so either team winning this game would not surprise us in the slightest.
To wrap it all up, we have Georgia finishing at 11-1. I think they're going to win that game against Clemson. I'm pretty confident in that to start the season. It's basically a home game for Georgia, even though it's in Atlanta. The 3 tricky matchups to watch out for are the road trips to Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss. We have Texas as slight favorites. This is largely due to the fact that they have the home field advantage. I think on a neutral site it would probably be slightly in Georgia's favor. I think it's going to be Quinn Ewers that makes the difference late in the fourth quarter. This will be a very close game, but we're going to lean with Texas as of right now. If they don't lose this game, I think there's a pretty good possibility they could drop one to Alabama on the road or Ole Miss. Those are both around the same likelihood to happen. This puts our projected record at 10.4 and 1.6, so somewhere in between 1 and 2 losses as the most likely range for Georgia. Personally, I think it's more likely they'll finish 11 and 1 or even 12 and 0 than 10 and 2. ESPN seems to agree with us. They have them at 10.3 and 1.7, so right in that same range of 1 to 2 losses. There's a 78.7% chance that Georgia will make the playoffs. I feel like it's going to be a little bit higher than that, but realistically, that's going to be pretty close, as is their national championship percentage at 20.7. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.